Well, the studio is buzzing today because popular singer and songwriter PLUMB is here to perform new music, and she also joins us with the backstory on her new project, Exhale, and her new book, Need You Now. Welcome to the Harvest Show, PLUMB.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I just want to know, I've been wanting to know this ever since I read your book or started looking at the book and listening to your music. Where does the name PLUMB come from?
It comes from a Suzanne Vega song called My Favorite Plum. It was on repeat one night. I thought I had the CD on repeat, and it was just the song. And it was right when I had signed, and I was trying to come up with a band name. And I kept hearing My Favorite Plum, like the song over and over. And I thought, oh, I think I'll check that out. And I tested it. My mom, I remember her saying, "Is it because you love purple?" Because I've always loved purple, and I was like, no, I love Suzanne Vega. I love the song, and so you put a B on the end and it means true. So I spelled it differently than the fruit.
Well, you certainly love music. I can tell just in listening to your music and listening to that song you just performed. Amazing.
Thank you.
Give us the backstory on Exhale. Where does it come from?
Exhale was inspired by a message that my pastor was teaching. My husband and I had split up 3.5 years ago, and one of the first things he heard the pastor say was not the church we went to at the time. My tour manager had taken him to church with him, and he heard him say, "Welcome, good morning." He said, "And this is a place where it's okay to not be okay." And my husband said he remembered hearing that, stuck with him, that he said it was like okay to be broken. It was okay, like a straitjacket almost came off, and he had this freedom to just say, "I'm not okay." And that's okay. You got to start somewhere. And consequently, we ended up, which I tell the whole story in the book, that we remarried each other and just have this really incredible story of redemption and reconciliation. And so fast forward a little bit, the pastor was speaking on the church and how we get really selfish about, well, I don't like the way that the pastor does this, and I don't like the music, and I don't know, and you just get kind of, and he said one Sunday, he said, "You know what, this does not exist for us. We exist for it. It's not here." And so he said, we exist to breathe in this grace that we've been freely given. You can't earn it. You don't deserve it, and you can't escape it. Like, God just loves you no matter what. Breathe that in and let it change you, and then go out these doors and just exhale. Just breathe out. And so I kind of took, in that split second, I felt like that kind of grabbed a perfect explanation to what I wanted this whole new record to say. It was this huge exhale, this huge breathing out, this huge sharing of what God did in my marriage and in my life and my heart and my home. And so I start off the song with saying it's okay to not be okay. And I basically take you on a little bit of a journey in 3.5 minutes of where my husband was on that pew, that really dark morning of being separated from me, to kind of being wrapped in love now. And now we are just breathing that out. So I love it.
Wow. So that particular song that you just sang, Lord, I'm Ready Now, great song, by the way.
Thank you.
Curious, what's the backstory to that song?
The backstory there is that when we were separated, I spent a good bit of time initially trying to change him and fix him and correct him and why did you leave? And I quickly learned you can't change other people, you can only work on yourself. You can pray for other people, you can work on your responses and your reactions to other people, but the way in which you do that, God can use to change them, but you can't change them. And so I started working on myself, and I realized my husband had been living with somebody really hard to live with. And I was really selfish most of my life, much less my career. I had said for the majority of my career that this was not about fame and fortune, but I actually kind of cared more about being rich and famous than I was willing to admit. And when I was at the darkest, most difficult, desperate place in my life, God didn't meet me with a finger in my face. He just wrapped his arms around me and said, let's just begin again. Let's just start over. And so as little by little things began to change, we began to obviously reconcile, remarry, and just God to completely restore what the locust had eaten, so to speak, of just better than before. I was just really humbled by that and really thankful that God, who, I didn't deserve his love, and we didn't deserve forgiveness, and we didn't deserve the second chance. We were given this. It was just really humbling. And so, Lord, I'm ready now as a response to saying, I don't want to be that girl anymore. I'm thankful for this second chance. But the best part about being able to be asked that question is that God is a God of infinite chances. And so if someone's listening right now that you think, okay, well, I've had a second chance and I've actually had a fifth chance, that's what grace is. You get infinite amounts of grace. I mean, you can just start over anytime. So it's like, okay, I'm ready now, and I might have to be ready now again tomorrow, and that's okay, because he's just recklessly chasing after us. He has a romantic, passionate love for us that we can't understand. And so that humbled me. And so instead of wanting to be the kind of Christian that said, can I still do this and be a Christian? I was asking the wrong question. It's like, what do I want to do because I'm Christian, because I've been died for? I've been, given the promise of heaven and the hope of all the things that he's done for me. So I wrote a song saying I'm ready now to be her. And
wow, I just feel so pulled in. All I need to do right now is just say amen, because you've given us a very powerful message.
Thanks.
And so what are some of the other themes? You talked about grace and love and forgiveness. I mean, how difficult was that for you to recognize that you were selfish? A lot of us don't want to come to that realization.
I don't think you can be Christian by yourself. I think that's why community is so emphasized throughout the whole story of Jesus. Like, he didn't walk around by himself. He had 12 friends, and one of the most difficult and important days of my life was when my best friend, I've described her. There's a whole chapter in my book about her. I call her my CC Bloom. So anybody who's watched the movie Beaches, you'll connect with that. But I've jokingly said she would cut out her, kidney with a dull knife and no anesthesia if she had to for me. Like, she's just a really good friend. Loved me enough that when I was saying to her, can you believe he left me? Can you believe he did this and this and this and this? And she was like, wow, that's awful. You're hard to be friends with too, and you're really selfish. Wow, so let's just talk about you. And it was like, whoa, ouch. I'm in the middle of this really hard time in my life. Like, I don't need this. And she was like, actually, that's exactly what you need. Like, right now, you need the people that love you the most, that want to see God's complete redemption here. The only way that's going to happen is if you're really honest with yourself. So let's not focus on Jeremy right now. Let's focus on you. You talk too much. You're not a good listener. You're really selfish. And I'm sure some of that pushed him away. So that doesn't necessarily justify all of his actions, but you have to own what you have to own. And when I started doing that introspectively, I knew she loved me. So when she said that, it was hard to hear. But then I had countless other community, friends in our community that were willing to fight for our marriage, which also meant fighting us sometimes. And so when we remarried, they were all there. And there's pictures of it in the book, and I tell the whole story. But just to look around at these people, these 40 people, that it was not limited to 40, but they were the 40 most specific ones that literally got the 3 a.m. phone calls and the countless lunches and the countless phone calls and things like that, that really fought for what was true. And I read a quote recently that said, you can do the one thing no one would blame you for, or you could do the best thing. Wow. And the road less traveled is usually harder, but it's usually better. Right. It's worth it. And so I feel like we fought hard for something that was probably at the time easier to walk away from, but long term, I feel like what we've done has been so much better. And so we have a better marriage than we've ever had, and I have 3 children that are growing up in a restored home, and there you can't put a price on that. And so I think it's a story worth telling, and it's a story that God is allowing me to tell. So,
but it's a great story. So how are people responding? Because I'm just like, I usually jump in with tons of questions, but I just want to let you unwrap it and tell it. So what's been the response?
It's just been really humbling to see people in the most broken place. And sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with a marriage as much as it may have to do with something completely different in their life that's bringing them into a really dark season. Just to see, like, if you imagine yourself in a completely sealed off black room where there's no light whatsoever, and to be able to tell the story, someone's living in that, and then God is using the story to kind of pierce through that darkness of just a sliver of light. And when you're in something so black, just that little light, that little crack under the door, you're just drawn to it. You can't get enough. You're believing that it's going to get bigger, and then it gets a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger, and suddenly you can see, and the light that comes in is just like oxygen to your lungs. And so to be a part of a story that God is using to give that to other people, it's just humbling, and people are responding as I responded when I needed hope in the most hopeless time of my life that I felt. I couldn't get enough of positive, encouraging things. And so to be kind of a part of something like that in a really dark, negative, painful world is, I don't know, I've had people say to me, you know, thanks for sharing your story. It's just so brave of you. And I don't know that I feel brave. I think I feel thankful, and I feel a sense of responsibility to share this. Like, there was a bullet coming at my head, and God reached out and grabbed it and said, do you trust me? And I decided, because of the community around me and the hope around me, I was able to say, I think so. And so when he did that, like, he made a marriage better than before. He restored a home. He changed a heart. He gave a completely new platform to my life. And I feel like the natural bend is to say, thank you. How can you use this? And so he's using it. And so here I am, I'm just being used by him, and that's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Awesome.
Well, for our viewers, it's just like, I'm just blown away by your message, and
Thanks.
I think your authenticity is just what's grabbed me. Wouldn't you say that,
Absolutely,
Pastor Mark?
yes.
And people need to hear that. And